In this video, we are going to dissect every single team in the MLB according to this 538 page, and we are going to then talk about what their playoff predictions are. And right now, the top team in baseball is the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Los Angeles Dodgers, heavy favorites to win the World Series last year. Unfortunately for them, they lost in the divisional series to the San Diego Padres. Now look to be back at it, and we are predicting that they have a 97-65 record. Chances of them making the playoffs are 98%, with an 80% chance of winning the NL West and a 17% chance at a World Series victory. That is pretty incredible considering how there are 30 teams in the MLB and the Dodgers have a 1 in 6 chance of winning it all. Atlanta Braves, big rival of the Mets. So if you're a Mets fan, looking at you, Lindsey Greenberg specifically, you do not want this to happen. But the Atlanta Braves are stimulated to have a 94-68 record, 93% chance to make the playoffs, 74% chance to win the NL East for the 6th consecutive year. Remember, they won it every year since 2018, including 2018, with a 13% chance at a World Series victory. Rays, they got a hot start with 13 straight wins, and we do think that the Tampa Bay Rays are going to carry that momentum through with a 99-63 record. Unfortunately for the Rays, the AL East is a very competitive division. And with the American League being so competitive in general, they have a 94% chance to make the playoffs, but only a 61% chance to win the division and a 12% chance at a World Series victory. Then the Houston Astros, the AL West, predicted to have a 95-67 record, 84% chance of making the playoffs. It's not actually that good, thankfully. It's good, but it's not a lock. A 57% chance to win the division, even though they don't hold a division lead right now, and an 11% chance to win the World Series. Looking at the New York Yankees, we predict them to have a 94-68 record. There's an 81% chance to make the playoffs, but only a 23% chance to win the division because, again, of how competitive the AL East is with the Rays. A 9% chance at a World Series victory. The Blue Jays, they are predicted to have an 89-73 record. That's pretty good, but it's not that much of a lock for the playoffs. A 56% chance to make it, only an 8% chance of actually winning that division, and a 5% chance of winning the World Series. Right now, if we look at the Blue Jays, wait, I think I only shared this one tab. But anyway, looking at the Blue Jays, and I apologize for the fact that you can't see this on your screen. Excuse me if I look up Blue Jays, you'll see something. Looking at them, they're only 4th in the AL East. And what's going to be tough for the Blue Jays is the fact that they are 31-27 with their win over the New York Mets last night. But looking at it, they're not even in the playoff spot because at this point, if the playoffs were to start today, the Orioles would get the 4th seed, the Astros would get the 5 seed, and the Yankees would get the 6th seed. And the Blue Jays, they're the 7th place, but they would not actually make the playoffs at this rate, which is unfortunate for them. It's bad news for them. That's why their chances are not so good. But really, if they can win the division, they have a good chance. But I don't see them being able to do that. Rangers are forecast to have a 91-71 record, 69% chance to make the playoffs, but probably for them as a wild card team with only a 34% chance of taking the division home with them and a 5% chance for them to win their first ever World Series. They came super, super close in 2011 to win the World Series. Remember, Game 6 was heartbreaking for the Texas Rangers, and they'd wind up losing it all in Game 7. The Minnesota Twins, 88-74, they have a 79% chance of making the playoffs, but that's because they have a 77% chance of winning the division. So the Minnesota Twins, in essence, basically the Minnesota Twins are very unlikely to make it as a wild card team. The AL Central this year has not been playing so good, and really because of that, It's very likely that they make it only through a clinch of the division. It's very unlikely that if they don't clinch the division, they'll be make it through, because there are some teams that won't make the playoffs that right now have better records than the Minnesota Twins. The New York Mets. This is a very important one, like the New York Yankees, because there's a lot of people from New York watching this video. The Mets predicted to have an 85-77 record. That's a 62% chance of making the playoffs, but only an 18% chance of winning the division. It looks like it's going to be like last year where the Mets make it as a wild card team. Looking at the Mets right now, they are down to 30-28, but the National League is not as competitive as the American League. That being said, though, if the playoffs were to start today, the Mets would not make it. Dodgers right now would get the 4th seed. In case you're wondering, the Arizona Diamondbacks, which we'll discuss later, actually possess the same record as them, and they have a tiebreaker over the Dodgers. The Pirates are going to get the 5 seed. Pirates has been very iffy recently. I don't see too much hope for the Pittsburgh Pirates, knowing how they played recently, unfortunately. And the same kind of skepticism is what keeps the Orioles predictions low. And then the Marlins and Mets, well, the Marlins have a tiebreaker over the Mets, so they get in as the 6th seed. And it's really close looking at how close the percentages are, which is why if this was to actually hold out, I'm pretty sure that we would see a tiebreaker needed with the Pittsburgh Pirates, because of the fact that the Pirates, if the season was actually to be over, then they'd probably all have the same wins if they kept along these paths. San Diego Padres, 53% chance to make the playoffs for the second year in a row and the 3rd time in 4 years, but only a 6% chance of winning the NL West. Again, a very hyper-competitive division. Like the Mets, a 4% chance to win the World Series. Milwaukee Brewers, we think they have a 67% chance of making the playoffs and a 56% chance of winning the not-so-competitive NL Central, but only a 3% chance to win their first ever World Series. Thank God, because I hate the Brewers. Arizona Diamondbacks, they have a 62% chance of making the playoffs, but only a 10% chance of winning a division against the very competitive LA Dodgers. The Dodgers have won the division 9 times in the last 10 years. Only exception is when the San Francisco Giants won it in 2021. Diamondbacks have a 2% chance of winning the World Series. Now, the Baltimore Orioles only have a 43% chance of making the playoffs. How, you might ask? Right now, the record is 36-21. And normally I don't mention this, but in this case, I think it's important. Also, the Mets really should be 30-28, not 29-28. Anyway, going back to the Baltimore Orioles, the Orioles are predicted to have an 87-75 record. Yeah, I forgot to go over the Brewers. That's 85-77, and the Diamondbacks is 86-76. With the Padres predicting to be 84-78, and the Mets predicted to be 85-77. 87-75 is good, but 87-75 is also not always a lock for the playoffs. In a very competitive American League, which we're expecting to see, it's very possible that 87 wins is just simply not enough to make the playoffs. It's very possible when you think about it, especially if the Rangers get the wild card spot, assuming the Astros win the division, and then we see the Yankees and Blue Jays make the playoffs, and the Rays win the division, that would make it very hard for the Orioles to slip in. And again, I'm not saying there's no chance for the Orioles. I'm just saying that it's unlikely in a very competitive division for them to succeed on their way through. And they only have a 6% chance of winning the division. Their chance of winning the World Series, 1%. San Francisco Giants, they only have a 36% chance to make the playoffs, 4% to win the division in a very competitive NL West, and a 1% chance of actually winning the World Series. Cardinals, 27% chance to make playoffs, 16 to win division, 1 for playoffs. By the way, the Giants are forecast to only have an 81-81 record. Cardinals are predicted to have a 78-84 record. The Philadelphia Phillies, the reigning NL champions, do not look like they're going to make the playoffs. 79-83 record is what they're predicted. Right now, they're 25-32. With a 26% chance of making the playoffs, a 4% chance of winning the division and a 1% chance of winning the World Series. Boston Red Sox. So both New York rivals are right next to each other. The Red Sox are forecast to have an 83-79 record, but a very similar 26% chance of making the playoffs. Why? Because, again, the American League is probably going to be doing better than the National League this year. 2% chance to win the division, 1% chance to make the win the World Series. And the Seattle Mariners, right now they've been playing pretty good. They have Mariners have been playing pretty good so far this year. 29-28, but again, not in a playoff spot. What? Wait, what? Hang on, excuse me. My screencastify is being weird. I'll have to see if I can edit this. Okay, that was weird. And I'll see if I can edit that out of the video. Oh my god. Oh my god. Um, Hopefully I can snip this video, that out of the video, because if I can't, oh god. Anyway, Seattle Mariners, 82-80 record is forecast, 21% chance of making the playoffs, unfortunately. 5% to win the division, 1% to win the first ever World Series. The Seattle Mariners actually played pretty well last year and made their first playoff in 21 years, but we don't think that they're going to repeat. After this point, all these teams have a less than 1% chance of winning the World Series. And some of their teams that we're going to get to later on in this video have less than a 1% chance to even make the playoffs. The LA Angels have a 20% chance of making their first playoff since 2014. They also have only a 4% chance of winning the AL West. It's even less than the Mariners and less than a 1% chance of winning the World Series. All their chances of winning the World Series from this point are less than 1%. Guardians, 18% to make the playoffs, 15% to win the AL Central, a very sluggish division. Angels are forecast to be 82-80. Guardians only 79-83, and that's what the Marlins are forecast to be too. Even though right now they're in a playoff spot with a 30-28 record, but their forecast only finished out 79-83. That leaves a 26% chance of making the playoffs somehow, but only a 4% chance of winning the NL East. And then comes the Chicago Cubs. They think that we're going to have a very depressing Cubs year with another 76-86 record. 17% chance of making the playoffs and only a 10% chance of winning the NL Central. Pirates are 23-14, but their chance of winning the World Series is slightly lower. Their forecast record is 77-85. You cannot make up the fact as to how they went from being the number one seed and being 20-8 to now being 29-27 and barely being in playoff contention. You cannot make that stuff up. And from here on out, all the teams' chances to make the playoffs are less than 10%. White Sox are predicted to finish 73-89. They have a 5% chance to make the playoffs and a 4% chance of winning the the AL Central. Thank God, because they're a Cubs rival. It's comforting to know that the Cubs are probably going to be the better of the two Chicago teams. The Cincinnati Reds, 6% chance to make the playoffs and only a 3% chance to win the division. Forecast record is 72-90. That's what the Tigers are forecast to finish out too. So they only have a 4% chance of winning their first playoffs in 2014, and it's going to be through winning the division. The Washington Nationals have a 2% chance of winning of making the playoffs, with a forecast record of 68-94, less than a 1% chance to win a division. And from here on out, the Rockies, Royals, and Athletics all have less than 1% chances to make the playoffs. The Rockies are forecast to finish out 67-95. The Royals have 58-104, and the Athletics are forecast to finish out 48-114. That 48-114 would be a historically bad season. Look at 538. They even say the Athletics are done for the season. Looking at the Royals are done for the season. And looking at the Rockies, they're still giving them hope at less than a 1% chance. But, I mean, it would be super hard for them. And when we look at the 51 to 49% chance of them winning the next game against the Royals, remember these are both really bad teams. The Rockies would need a miracle to make the playoffs, but like when you look at it, you can see how when they say that they're done for the series, the Rockies still have a glimmer of hope if you're a Colorado Rockies fan. I do want to make that point. The Rockies have a glimmer of hope, but they would need a miracle to get there. The Athletics and the Royals, we can effectively say that they're eliminated from playoff contention. They're not, but they would need such a miracle to make the playoffs that at this point they realistically don't even control their own destiny. And the fact that they don't control their own destiny when we're about a quarter of the way done with the season, maybe more like a third at this point, that's really sad.